These are Japanese dovetails, and I made them using this jig. These are Japanese dovetails. They're also referred to as sunrise dovetails or compound angled dovetails. Now the thing that's special about these is that there is no specific pin or tail. I guess you could refer to as the one with the edges as the one with the tails, or the one that doesn't have edges as the pins, but really there is no specific orientation. What's also special about it is the way that it comes together. Look at this and you're saying, how does this actually go together? Because there's all sorts of angles in all sorts of ways. So let me unclamp this and give you a better look. So that's what they look like when they're fully assembled. And yeah, this one has a few gaps. This was one of my first ones, but hey, in fact, how it comes apart is actually at a 45-degree angle. So let's see if we can get this guy apart. It's much easier in the vise. So you see, it came out like that. Right, if you try putting it in one direction like this, you see you have interference, like that. And if you try putting it this way, it's just not going to go. So you have to slide it in at an angle like this. Let's see if we can do it. There it is. Okay, so this one has come apart and back together a couple times, so it's got some wear on it, and you can see it slides very easily. Not really a big deal because this is just a showpiece. Anyway, I did make this using this jig, and there's something special about compound angled dovetails. Unlike regular dovetails where you cut the tails and then use that to lay out your pins, for compound angled dovetails you don't have that luxury. You have to lay out both independently and then cut them independently. That's why it's important that your layout be spot on, and that's what this jig helps with. You could use dividers. The next would be using bevel gauges and measuring. This is the method that I like, which is relying on these jigs that have all the angles already preset, and all you have to do is match up the lines and then get to cutting. Let me show you how this guy works. So there's something I gotta tell you about these dovetails, is that there's really not one specific design. You can make them in whatever orientation that you want, whatever spacing, and it really doesn't matter. This one is my larger set of dovetails, which I like to call a sunrise dovetail because it fans outward. But at the same time, you could make them go inward, and that would kind of make it look like a sunset. So, you know, I call those a sunrise and these a sunset. So these are a little bit different in that they only have 2 pins there. So you can make them like that, fanning outward, or you can make them fanning inward, just like that. Now right here in the middle there's a single one, and that's using this jig right here. So you can see how it kind of is wider at the back over here and thinner right at the eris where the 2 boards meet. So that's your eris right there. And then this last one is kind of more fingers, more pins, right, rather, and then they all fan inward on this one, and then you can see this one, they fan outward, and the one right underneath it is using, I believe, the sunrise, and this would be the sunset. So I believe that one should go there, and that one goes there. So you can see the difference, right? They're using similar measurements, but different orientations. So these 2 jigs are almost paired, and likewise with all the other ones that I showed you. So, and these are all put together in the same fashion, which means at a 45-degree angle. But the cool thing about this is that you could see I have essentially 3 different flavors of designs of these dovetails, but they all went together. And the reason they all went together is because the compound angles are just variations of each other. So as long as you follow the design principles of putting the same angle over here as you put down here, then everything should work out pretty much exactly. So let me help you and show you how I lay out at least one of these dovetails, and then essentially laying out the rest of these should be the exact same way. Okay, so to do these dovetails, what I like to use is a Moxon vise. You could use a regular vise or a set of clamps, whatever you have at your disposal, but I find this to be the best setup to make these. Now, just like regular dovetails, you're going to want to use a depth stop, so I set it over here on the edge. Just drop it down to the table, raise it just a hair, and then I'll go ahead and test it to make sure that the cutter is right at the very edge, if not protruding by just a little bit. So this one could use a little bit more distance. Let's see. Okay, it is just over the edge. And so I find it, a lot of people just are able to do this kind of by hand. I like to put it into my vise. And there's no secret that you obviously need to have a nice flat surface over here and then kind of square up to the edge. So both of them need to be that. So to go ahead and take your depth your depth gauge and mark that line all the way around. Okay, so there's one of them. I'll go ahead and do the next one. Okay, so now we need to determine which side is out. So in this case, this is the outside for this set of dovetails over here, so I'm just going to mark out. And this one, the outside is over here, so I'm also going to mark out. So we're going to use, probably we'll just do the exact same dovetail that's already on here. That way we can see if they match up when we cut them out. Like this, out towards me, and then the opposite side, out, is going to be on the outside. Ooh, just kidding. Like that. So outside, outside. Okay, put it into our vise. Push them downward. I'll go ahead and do some fine adjusting. Okay. Now these two are perfectly flush. I'll go ahead and clamp them in. And done. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is find the center, essentially the rough center, because the way that these jigs work is that you need that center line to be able to place it correctly on each one. So like that. So you see that line right there in the center, that's going to be your center line. Oh man, I got a splinter. Okay, so these pieces are roughly, let's see, 3 7/8. So call it 2 1/8 or so. Sorry, 2 minus an 8, 2 minus a 16th. So right there. So that's the rough center. Okay, so if I were doing this for real, I'd be using a marking knife. So marking knife that you want is going to be something like this, where it's a flat side on one and then it has double bevels on the opposite side. And you need double bevels because you need to be able to mark from one side and then spin it and reference the other side. So I'm going to use this guy right here, and I'm going to reference my straight edge, my square, and mark my line right there. Now you're not going to be able to see this, but I am, and I'm going to help you see it in just a moment. So there's my line. It's very faint, but if I put my pencil in it, there's my line, right down the center. Okay. So it doesn't matter which jig I want to use, they all have some way to line these guys up. So in this case, I want to start with this one right here. I would find that center line, so you can see right through here I can find that line that I struck, and there, it's properly aligned right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my marking knife and I'm going to start at the edge of the wood. I'm not going to go all the way to the end of the jig because this stuff is irrelevant back here. I'm going to start at the end of this half of the board, right? So starting right here, I'm going to go ahead and mark myself my line. Like that. That's 1, 2, and careful here that you don't cut your fingers, please. You can always go in the opposite direction, and that helps too. Okay. So the alternative to this is using a set of dividers. And frankly, the set of dividers was just kind of frustrating to me and didn't end up the way I wanted it to. So I can see the lines, but once again, you guys can't see it. So I'm going to put it back on here and I'm going to use my pencil to outline them. The neat thing is that once you do those lines on there, you can realign this by, one, looking at the center line, but you can also see where you've made those cuts and align the jig to that. So here's this first line. Here's that second line. So on and so forth. So you can see so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines that I drew on there. I'm also going to do the exact same thing over here. So there it is. I have those lines that I used. So normally I'd use the marking knife. But for the sake of you guys seeing, I'm just going to do it in pencil. Okay, so I went a little bit too far on this one, but that's not a problem. I can either just erase it or not cut to it. But as you can see, I have those lines go all the way to where that depth gauge cut, which is all the way down here. Okay, now for this other board, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to reference the opposite side. So go ahead and put it right here. And now the neat thing is that these lines that I marked on this side over here should line up to the edge of that jig. So if using my marking knife, I would do that. But here I'm just using a pencil. Okay, and there it is. That's pretty much the layout for these dovetails. So now I have to make a decision. I have to say, okay, which one am I going to keep as pins and which one am I going to keep as tails? So I could tell you from the other side, this one has these tails cut out. So like this. And then the other piece has these cut out. Perfect. Okay, so now that's a quick way to kind of keep track of which one needs to come out and which one needs to stay. So obviously I need to mark the stuff on the other side, but I can't really see it from here. So I'm just going to take all this apart, flip it over. I can get rid of the other board, because I really don't need that. And use the exact same jig and do the exact same thing down here. And obviously you would be cutting those with a marking knife, not marking them with a pencil. So right here, right here, right here. And that's all the stuff that I'm going to remove. And now it's just cutting it as if it were a regular dovetail. Now you're going to ask, hey, don't you mark the stuff on the back? Actually, no, we don't. Because, one, it doesn't really matter. These two lines already establish a plane. So 2 lines or 3 points make a plane. And then 2, I don't know exactly what that angle is going to be on the back. And then 3, it really doesn't matter because the interior of this joint is hidden. Right? When I assemble this, I can't see what that stuff is doing in there. I have a small gap, but I can't really tell if they're properly aligned, if they have some gaps between them, so I really don't care what that stuff does on the inside. So frankly, you don't necessarily need to waste your time getting a bevel gauge and getting the exact angle on there, because it doesn't matter. Go figure. So there it is. Okay, so just kind of let you know how this works if you were using a different jig. So if you were using, say for instance this jig, you can see it has that center line right there. So instead of marking the stuff that like I did there, I would have just used this one. So you just got to stay consistent in which jig you use. Or this one, which is kind of the opposite of this one. See, so sunrise, sunset, you know, just kind of silly name that I gave it. If you wanted to do, I think this one is probably the most difficult one because it has so many pieces to it. You know, it's the exact same thing. There's that center line, so all you have to do is line it up. And if you did this one doesn't necessarily have a center line, but what it does have is this notch at the very bottom right there, so you can see that. So when I set it up here, I just line it up to that line. And frankly, it almost doesn't matter, because by the time that you do the first set of lines, that you draw them like this, when you take this piece, this jig, to the opposite side, right, imagine that there's this board on the other side over here, you'll be able to line it up to those lines that you scribed. So like that and like that, okay? And this one, the similar thing, right? So it doesn't actually have a center line, but it has a place where it terminates. So you just kind of eyeball it there, and then the same thing, just use that idea that this is going to line up to where those lines were. Okay, so I hope that helps. These jigs, I find them to be tremendously helpful. I've used a number of jigs. For this one, I used about 3 different combinations to make this one, which is kind of the thinner ones, that single one, and then the 2 double ones like this. So if you want to use a series of combinations of these to make a beautiful joint, a beautiful box or something like that, kind of your choice. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoy and hope that you find these helpful.